She had $41 to her name and hadn't eaten in 2 days. He was worth $4 billion and owned half of Chicago. But on one freezing night in December, she gave him something his money could never buy. And what he discovered about her almost broke him in two. This is a true story about what happens when you stop to help a stranger on the coldest night of the year. And I promise, by the end, you'll never look at a homeless person the same way again. Welcome to Story Buddy. While you're here, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. New York? London? Lagos? Toronto? Let me know. And stay until the end, because what happens in the last 5 minutes will change how you see everything. Let me tell you about a night that proved the people we ignore might be the ones who save us. This is a true story, and I promise by the end you'll understand why kindness from the most unexpected places can heal wounds money never could. It was bitter cold in Chicago, December 23rd. The kind of cold that hurts your lungs when you breathe. The kind that makes you walk faster and look down at your feet instead of at the people around you. The kind of cold that kills homeless people every single winter while the rest of us hurry past pretending not to see them. Grace Williams sat on a piece of cardboard outside St. Michael's Hospital. She'd been there for 3 hours, waiting. Not for money, not for food, just waiting. She was 58 years old. Her coat was held together with safety pins. Her gloves had holes in every finger. Her shoes were wrapped in plastic bags to keep out the wet. She looked like what most people expected a homeless woman to look like. Broken, forgotten, invisible. But Grace Williams was none of those things, not really. She was waiting for something specific, someone specific, and she'd been waiting for almost 2 years. That's when she saw him. An old man in a wheelchair being pushed through the hospital doors by a nurse. He was thin, frail, oxygen tubes in his nose, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders that probably cost more than Grace had seen in 5 years. The nurse wheeled him to the pickup area and left him there, alone, in the freezing cold. Grace watched for 5 minutes, 10, 15. No one came. The old man started to shake. His lips were turning blue. His thin hands trembled on the armrests of his wheelchair. And Grace Williams did something that would change 2 families forever. She got up from her cardboard, walked over to him, and sat down on the frozen concrete right beside his wheelchair. "You look cold," she said it simply, no judgment, no pity. The old man turned his head slowly. His eyes were cloudy but sharp, intelligent, the eyes of someone who'd commanded rooms full of powerful people. "I'm fine," his voice was barely a whisper. "My son is coming." "How long you been waiting?" "I don't know anymore." Grace reached into her coat and pulled out a thermos, dented, old, but she unscrewed the cap and steam rose into the frozen air. "It's just hot water with some honey," she said, "but it'll warm you up." The old man stared at the thermos like it was made of gold. "Why would you share that with me?" "Because you need it more than I do right now." She held the cup to his lips, helped him drink, and for the first time in what looked like a very long time, the old man smiled. "What's your name?" he asked. "Grace." "What's yours?" "Robert. Robert Mitchell." "Nice to meet you, Robert Mitchell. Now let's get you warm before your son shows up." She didn't know it then, but Robert Mitchell wasn't just any old man. He was the founder of Mitchell Industries, a $6 billion empire, one of the wealthiest men in Chicago history. And his son, the one who was supposed to pick him up, was about to walk into a moment that would shatter everything he thought he knew. Jonathan Mitchell was late. He was always late these days. Too many meetings, too many deals, too many people who needed him to be somewhere important doing something important. His father's chemotherapy appointment had ended 45 minutes ago. Jonathan knew this. He'd gotten 3 texts from the hospital. But he was in the middle of a conference call worth $200 million, and that seemed more important. It always seemed more important. His driver pulled up to St. Michael's at 6:47 p.m. Jonathan was already composing an apology in his head, the same apology he'd given 100 times before. "Sorry, Dad, work ran late, you know how it is." But when Jonathan stepped out of his Mercedes and looked toward the pickup area, his apology died in his throat. His father, the man who'd built an empire from nothing, the man who'd raised Jonathan alone after his mother died, the man who was worth more than most small countries, his father was being fed hot water by a homeless woman. Not just being fed, he was smiling, laughing at something she'd said, looking more alive than Jonathan had seen him in months. Jonathan felt something twist in his chest. Confusion, shame, anger. He wasn't sure which. He walked toward them, his $3,000 shoes clicking on the concrete. "What's going on here?" His voice came out harsher than he intended. The homeless woman looked up, didn't flinch, didn't apologize, just met his eyes with a steady gaze. "Your father was cold. I was helping him." "Helping him? You're helping yourself to God knows what." Jonathan reached for his wallet. "How much? How much do you want? $50? $100? Take it and leave him alone." The homeless woman stood slowly. She was shorter than Jonathan expected. Thin, but there was something in her posture. Dignity. The kind that doesn't come from money. "I don't want your money, sir." "Then what do you want?" "I wanted your father to be warm. He's been sitting out here for almost an hour, in December, alone." The words hit Jonathan like a slap. He looked at his father, really looked, at the blue lips that were just now getting color back, at the thin hands that trembled, at the oxygen tubes and the thin blanket that wasn't nearly warm enough. "Dad, are you okay?" Robert Mitchell looked at his son, then at Grace, then back at his son. "I'm fine now, thanks to this woman. She sat with me, kept me company, shared the only hot drink she had." Jonathan felt his face flush. "Dad, I'm sorry, the meeting ran long and—" "The meetings always run long, Jonathan. They've been running long for 30 years. This is different." "Is it?" Jonathan didn't have an answer. Grace started to walk away, back toward her cardboard, back to the cold and the dark and the invisibility that came with being homeless in a city that had forgotten to see. "Wait." Jonathan's voice stopped her. She turned. "What's your name?" "Grace Williams." Jonathan pulled out his business card, handed it to her. "Come to this address tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I want to repay you properly for helping my father." Grace looked at the card. Mitchell Industries, Jonathan Mitchell, CEO. She looked back at him. "I told you, I don't want your money." "Then come for breakfast, a hot meal, that's all. You helped my father, the least I can do is feed you." Grace studied his face, looking for something. Jonathan didn't know what. Finally, she nodded. "I'll think about it." She walked away into the darkness, and Jonathan helped his father into the warm car. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Robert broke the silence. "She's special, that one." "She's homeless, Dad." "I know what she is. I'm asking if you know who she is." Jonathan didn't understand the question. Not then. But he would, soon enough. Before I continue this story, drop your location in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. New York? London? Lagos? Toronto? Let me know. And stay until the end, because what happens in the last 5 minutes will change how you see everything. Grace Williams hadn't always been homeless. 20 years ago, she was Dr. Grace Williams, Chief of Pediatric Oncology at Children's Memorial Hospital, one of the most respected cancer doctors in the Midwest. She had saved hundreds of children's lives, held parents' hands while delivering the worst news imaginable, celebrated when the impossible became possible, grieved when it didn't. She had a house in Lincoln Park, a husband named David who taught music at Northwestern, a daughter named Lily who was 7 years old and wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Grace had everything. And then one morning, everything disappeared. The accident happened on a Tuesday. David was driving Lily to school. A delivery truck ran a red light at 45 miles per hour. David died instantly. Lily held on for 3 days. 3 days of Grace sitting beside her daughter's bed in the same hospital where she'd saved so many other children. 3 days of begging God or the universe or anyone who would listen. 3 days of watching monitors and holding tiny hands and whispering, "Please, please, please." Lily died on a Friday afternoon. The sun was shining through the window. Birds were singing outside. The world kept going like nothing had happened. Grace stopped. She couldn't go back to work, couldn't save other children when she couldn't save her own, couldn't look at parents and tell them everything would be okay when she knew that was a lie. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring about anything at all. The hospital put her on leave, then extended the leave, then quietly let her go when it became clear she wasn't coming back. The house in Lincoln Park was too full of memories. David's music still on the piano, Lily's drawings still on the refrigerator, their ghosts in every room. Grace sold everything, gave the money to the hospital's Children's Cancer Fund, walked out with one suitcase and no idea where she was going. She ended up on the streets, not because she had no options. She had a sister in California who begged her to come stay, had former colleagues who would have hired her in a heartbeat, had enough credentials to start over anywhere in the country. But Grace didn't want to start over. She wanted to disappear. And on the streets of Chicago, she finally did. Just another homeless woman, invisible, forgotten, exactly what she wanted to be. For 18 years, she lived that way. Shelters in winter, doorways in summer, the kindness of strangers who gave her food, the cruelty of others who gave her nothing but contempt. She never told anyone who she used to be, never asked for help, never tried to go back. Until 2 years ago, when she saw a story in an abandoned newspaper about Robert Mitchell, billionaire diagnosed with terminal cancer, given 18 months to live, checked in to St. Michael's Hospital for treatment. And Grace remembered. She remembered a night 30 years ago, a night when she was still Dr. Williams, when a terrified young man had brought his wife into the emergency room. The wife was pregnant. Something was wrong. She was bleeding and scared and convinced she was going to lose the baby. Grace wasn't an OB, but the obstetrics department was overwhelmed that night and someone needed to stay with this woman until a specialist arrived. So Grace stayed, held her hand, talked her through the fear, monitored the baby's heartbeat, and told her over and over that everything would be okay. The specialist arrived 2 hours later. The wife was stabilized. The baby was fine. The young man had been so grateful, had tried to give Grace money. She'd refused. "Just take care of your family," she'd said. "That's payment enough." The young man's name was Robert Mitchell. His wife was Caroline, and the baby whose heartbeat Grace had monitored through that terrifying night grew up to be Jonathan Mitchell. Grace never forgot them, even after everything that happened, even after she lost David and Lily and herself. She remembered Robert Mitchell's eyes that night, the desperation, the love, the gratitude. And when she read that he was dying, she started watching for him. Not every day, just when she was near St. Michael's. She'd look for the wheelchair, the oxygen tubes, the frail body that once belonged to a man who'd built an empire. She didn't know why she watched, didn't know what she was waiting for, until that December night when she finally had a chance to repay a kindness she'd never forgotten. Grace didn't go to Mitchell Industries the next morning. She'd learned not to trust rich people who promised things. Most of them made offers they never intended to keep. Most of them forgot about the homeless the moment they walked away. But 3 days later, on Christmas Eve, something unexpected happened. She was in her usual spot outside St. Michael's. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. Most homeless people had gone to shelters. Grace stayed because she wanted to. Because 18 years ago on Christmas Eve, Lily took her last breath. And every Christmas Eve since, Grace sat outside and remembered. A black Mercedes pulled up. The window rolled down. Jonathan Mitchell looked out. "You didn't come," he said. Grace didn't respond. Jonathan got out of the car, walked toward her. His breath made clouds in the frozen air. "I looked for you," he said, "for 3 days. I had my assistant call every shelter in the city. No one had seen you. Maybe I didn't want to be found." "Why not?" "Because I don't need your charity." Jonathan was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down on the frozen concrete beside her, his $3,000 suit pants hitting the ground without hesitation. "My father can't talk about you," he said. "He calls you the angel who saved him from the cold. Talks about your eyes. Says they remind him of someone he knew a long time ago." Grace felt something tighten in her chest. "He's dying," Jonathan continued. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Doctors give him maybe 3 months, probably less." "I know. I read about it in the paper." "That's why you were there that night, wasn't it? Waiting for him." Grace didn't answer. "He wants to see you again, to thank you properly." Jonathan looked at her. "And I want to apologize for how I spoke to you. You were protecting your father. That's what sons do. I was being an arrogant ass. That's what I've been most of my life. My father's been trying to tell me that for years. I didn't listen." Grace studied him. Same eyes as Robert, same jawline, but something different underneath, harder, more closed off. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly, "to be so afraid of being kind?" Jonathan flinched. No one had ever asked him that before. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." They sat in silence for a long moment, two strangers on a frozen sidewalk on Christmas Eve, one with nothing, one with everything, and somehow the one with nothing seemed more at peace. "My mother died when I was born," Jonathan finally said. "My father raised me alone, worked 20 hours a day to build his company, gave me everything money could buy. But not the things money couldn't. He tried." Jonathan's voice cracked slightly. "He was always there for the important things, graduations, birthdays. He never knew how to show what he felt. And I grew up thinking that was normal, thinking that providing was the same as loving. It's not. I know that now." Jonathan looked at her, looking at him in that hospital waiting area, so happy to be talking to a stranger while I was too busy with a conference call to pick him up. "That's when I knew." "Knew what?" "That I've been failing him for years, decades. I've been so focused on running his company that I forgot to just be his son." Grace nodded slowly. "It's not too late," she said. "He has 3 months. Then you have 3 months to do it differently." Jonathan was quiet. Then he stood, brushed off his pants, reached out a hand to help him up. "Come with me," he said. "Please. 1 meal, a warm bed for the night. My father would never forgive me if I left you out here on Christmas Eve." Grace looked at his hand, at his face, at the Mercedes waiting with its engine running. She thought about Lily, about David, about 18 years of trying to disappear. And then she took his hand. "Okay," she said, "1 meal." But 1 meal would become so much more. The Mitchell estate was like nothing Grace had seen in nearly 2 decades. A mansion in Lake Forest, 20 rooms, staff that moved silently through the halls, Christmas decorations that probably cost more than most people's yearly salaries. Jonathan led her to a guest suite on the first floor, private bathroom, king-sized bed, more space than Grace had called home in 18 years. "There are fresh clothes in the closet," he said. "My assistant guessed at sizes. If nothing fits, we can get something else." "This is too much. It's not nearly enough." Jonathan paused at the door. "Dinner is at 7. My father will be there. He's having a good day. Those are getting rarer." He left Grace alone in a room that felt like a dream. She showered for the first time in weeks, real hot water, real soap that smelled like lavender, clean towels that were softer than anything she could remember. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. The hair that was gray and tangled was now clean and shining. The face that was weathered and tired still showed every year of pain. But the eyes were the same. The eyes that had watched Lily take her last breath. the eyes that had seen so much suffering and still somehow kept looking. Grace got dressed in clothes that fit perfectly: simple black pants, a soft blue sweater, clean shoes that didn't have holes. She walked downstairs at exactly 7 p.m. Robert Mitchell was waiting in the dining room. He was in his wheelchair again, but he looked stronger than he had outside the hospital. Color in his cheeks, light in his eyes. When he saw Grace, his whole face transformed. "You came," he said. "I wasn't sure you would. Your son is very persuasive. He gets that from his mother." Robert gestured to the seat beside him. Grace sat down. "I've been thinking about you since that night," Robert said, "trying to figure out where I know you from. Because I do know you, I'm certain of it." Grace felt her heart start pounding. "We've never met, Mr. Mitchell." Robert studied her face. "You're lying," he said gently. "I can always tell when someone's lying. Had to learn that in business. But I'm not going to push. You'll tell me when you're ready." Dinner was served. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, more food than Grace had seen in one place in years. Jonathan joined them, sat across from Grace, asked questions about her life on the streets, where she slept, how she survived the winters, what the shelters were like. Grace answered honestly, told him about the kindness of strangers and the cruelty of others, about the cold that seeped into your bones, and the loneliness that was somehow worse than the cold. Robert listened to everything, his eyes never leaving her face. Finally, he spoke. "How does someone like you end up on the streets?" "Robert," Jonathan's voice was sharp, "that's not appropriate." "It's okay," Grace said. She looked at Robert. "How does anyone end up there? Bad luck, bad choices, loss that breaks something inside you that doesn't know how to heal." "What did you lose?" The question hung in the air, heavy, dangerous. Grace was quiet for a long moment. "Everything," she finally said. "I lost everything." She didn't elaborate. Robert didn't push. But something passed between them in that moment. An understanding. Two people who knew what it meant to love something completely and lose it anyway. Grace stayed that night, and the next night, and the night after that. She told herself it was temporary, just until the cold snap passed, just until she felt strong enough to go back to her cardboard and her doorways and her careful invisibility. But days turned into weeks. She sat with Robert every afternoon while Jonathan was at work. They talked about everything and nothing, books they'd read, places they'd been, memories that still made them smile despite all the pain that came after. Robert's health was failing. Everyone could see it. But somehow, when Grace was with him, he seemed stronger, more present, more himself. Jonathan noticed. "He comes to dinner every night now," Jonathan told Grace. "Before you came, he barely ate, barely talked, just sat in his room waiting to die. Maybe he just needed someone to listen." "Maybe," Jonathan paused. "Or maybe he needed you specifically." 3 weeks after Grace arrived at the Mitchell estate, Robert had a very bad day. The cancer was spreading. The doctors had warned this would happen. Good days would become fewer. Bad days would become worse. Grace sat beside his bed, holding his hand. "I figured it out," Robert said. His voice was thin, weak, but certain. "Figured what out?" 1994, Chicago General. My wife Caroline was bleeding. We thought we were going to lose the baby." Grace felt tears starting. "There was a doctor," Robert continued, "a young woman, not even an OB, but she stayed with us anyway, held Caroline's hand, monitored the baby's heartbeat, told us everything would be okay." Robert squeezed Grace's hand. "That baby was Jonathan, and that doctor was you." Grace told him everything, about David, about Lily, about the accident that had destroyed her world, about the 18 years of trying to disappear. Robert listened without interrupting, tears streaming down his face. When she finished, he didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "You saved my son once before he was even born, and now you've given me the best weeks I've had in years." "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Mitchell. I owe you everything. And please, call me Robert." He reached up and touched her face. "You've been punishing yourself for 18 years for something that wasn't your fault. Caroline's death wasn't my fault either, but I spent decades feeling guilty anyway, feeling like I should have done more, should have been more. What changed? Getting sick, facing the end, realizing that all the guilt and regret I'd carried didn't bring her back, didn't help Jonathan, didn't do anything except make me miss all the good that was still right in front of me." Robert's eyes were wet. "Don't waste any more time, Grace. Lily wouldn't want that. David wouldn't want that. You've done enough penance. It's time to live again." Jonathan was listening from the doorway. He'd come home early, heard voices from his father's room, stood in the hallway as Grace told her story, heard about the brilliant doctor she used to be, the family she'd lost, the years she'd spent trying to disappear. And suddenly, so many things made sense. The way she moved through the house, competent, confident, like someone who'd once been in charge. The way she talked to his father's doctors, asking the right questions, understanding the answers. The way she looked at old photos of Jonathan as a baby, tears in her eyes, like she was seeing something no one else could see. She'd been there the night he was born. She'd helped save his life before he'd taken his first breath. And his father was right. She'd been saving them again ever since that night outside St. Michael's. Jonathan knocked on the door. Grace looked up. Her face was still wet with tears. "I heard," he said simply. "Everything. I should have told you sooner. You didn't owe us your story." Jonathan walked to his father's bed, stood on the opposite side from Grace. "But I'm glad you told him. He looks more at peace than I've seen him in months." Robert smiled weakly. "This is what I wanted," he said. "The three of us, together." "Dad, I don't have much time left." Jonathan's voice was getting fainter. "I need you to do something for me. Anything. Take care of her." "Dad, she can take care of herself." "I know she can, but everyone needs family, and she's been without one for too long." Robert reached for Jonathan's hand, pulled it towards Grace's. "You saved him once," Robert whispered to Grace, "and now you've saved me. Let us return the favor." He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. Grace and Jonathan sat on either side of his bed, holding his hands, holding each other's hands. And in the quiet of that winter night, Robert Mitchell smiled. He was not alone. He was not forgotten. He was surrounded by love. That's all anyone can ask for at the end. Robert died on Valentine's Day. Not Christmas like everyone expected. He held on for 2 more months. 2 months of dinners with Grace and Jonathan. 2 months of stories and laughter and all the things he'd been too busy to enjoy when he was healthy. The funeral was huge. Hundreds of people from the business world, politicians, celebrities, everyone wanted to pay respects to the great Robert Mitchell. But the only ones who really grieved were Grace and Jonathan. They stood together at the grave after everyone else had left. "What are you going to do now?" Jonathan asked. "I don't know." Grace stared at the headstone. "I came here to help a stranger in the cold. I didn't expect any of this." "Stay." Jonathan's voice was quiet. "Please. The house is too empty without him. I don't want it to be empty without you, too." Grace looked at him. He was so different from the man she'd met outside St. Michael's. Softer, kinder, more willing to let people in. Robert had done that. In his final weeks, he'd taught his son how to be human again. "Okay," Grace said. "I'll stay. For now." But staying meant rebuilding. Grace couldn't go back to medicine. Too much time had passed. Licenses expired, skills forgotten. But she could do something else, something Robert had talked about in those final weeks. The Mitchell Foundation for Children's Health. Robert had left instructions, $500 million to start, a nonprofit dedicated to helping families who couldn't afford cancer treatment for their children. And he wanted Grace to run it. Jonathan showed her the document 3 weeks after the funeral. "He wrote this 2 days before he died," Jonathan said. "Said you were the only person he trusted to do it right." Grace read the words through tears. "She knows what it's like to lose a child," Robert had written. "She knows what those families are going through. She will fight for them because she couldn't fight for Lily. She also knows what it means to be saved by a stranger. Grace, if you're reading this, this is your chance, not to forget what happened, but to transform it into something meaningful, something that helps others. You saved my son before he was born. You saved me before I died. Now go save as many children as you can. This is my gift to you. Please accept it." 5 years later, Grace stood at a podium in the Mitchell Foundation's new headquarters. The building was 12 stories of glass and hope. Treatment centers, research facilities, family housing, everything a child with cancer might need, all under one roof. And free, completely free for any family who needed it. Grace looked out at the crowd. Donors, doctors, politicians, families whose children had been treated there. Jonathan sat in the front row. Next to him was a woman named Sarah he'd met at a foundation event. They were engaged now, getting married in the spring. Grace introduced them. She cleared her throat. 23 years ago, she began, I lost my daughter to cancer. She was 7 years old. Her name was Lily. The room was silent. I also lost my husband, my career, my will to live. I spent almost 2 decades trying to disappear, trying to stop existing. And then one December night, I saw an old man sitting in the cold outside a hospital. He was forgotten, alone, invisible, just like me. She paused. I didn't help Robert Mitchell because I wanted anything in return. I helped him because he needed help. That's it. That's the only reason. But what happened next changed everything. Robert and his son Jonathan brought me into their family, gave me purpose again, gave me a reason to stop hiding and start living. Grace looked at Jonathan. He was crying, didn't try to hide it. Robert Mitchell didn't just save my life. He showed me that the worst things that happen to us don't have to define us. They can transform us, make us better, make us more able to help others who are suffering. That's what this foundation is about. Transformation through kindness, hope through action, light through darkness. She held up a photo. Lily at age 6, smiling, missing 2 front teeth. This is my daughter. She would have been 30 years old this year. I like to think she would have been proud of what we've built here. Grace put the photo down. To the families here tonight, I see you. I know your fear. I know your pain. And I promise you, we will fight beside you every single day. To the doctors and researchers, thank you for dedicating your lives to healing. You are heroes, every single one of you. And to Robert Mitchell, wherever you are. Grace smiled through her tears. Thank you for stopping a homeless woman from disappearing completely. Thank you for reminding me that kindness is never wasted. Thank you for giving me back my life. The room erupted in applause, but Grace wasn't finished. There's one more thing Robert would want me to say, something he told me the night before he died. She looked directly at the audience. The person you walk past tomorrow, the homeless man on the corner, the elderly woman struggling with her groceries, the child who looks lost and scared. Stop. Look at them. Really see them. Because you never know what they've survived. You never know what gifts they carry inside them. You never know how one moment of kindness might change everything. For them and for you. Grace stepped back from the podium. And that's the truth I want you to remember, friends. After the event, Grace and Jonathan stood on the foundation's rooftop, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Dad would have loved this, Jonathan said. I know. He'd probably say the building was too big, too expensive, too flashy. Grace laughed. Then he'd smile and say that's exactly what those kids deserved. They stood in comfortable silence. You know what I think about sometimes? What? That night outside the hospital. What would have happened if you hadn't been there? If you'd been somewhere else? If Dad just sat in the cold until his driver eventually noticed he was missing? Grace nodded. I think about it too. He might have gotten pneumonia. His immune system was already compromised from the chemo. It could have killed him. Jonathan turned to look at her. You gave me 2 more months with my father. 2 months I would have wasted if you hadn't shown me how to be present, how to stop running and just be there. Grace didn't say anything, just reached over and squeezed his hand. I'm getting married in the spring, Jonathan said. Sarah and I want you to be there, not as a guest, as family. Jonathan! You are family, Grace. You've been family since that night in the cold. Dad knew it, I know it, and I want to make it official. He pulled out an envelope. I had the lawyers draw this up. Adoption papers. You'd be Grace Mitchell, my mother. Officially. Grace stared at the envelope, tears streaming down her face. I know it's just a piece of paper, Jonathan continued. It doesn't change what we've built these past years. But Dad wanted this. He told me before he died. Make her a Mitchell, he said. She's earned it. Grace took the envelope, opened it, read through the legal document. And then she looked at Jonathan, this boy whose heartbeat she'd monitored 49 years ago, this man who'd grown into someone Robert would be proud of. Yes, she said, I accept. Jonathan hugged her tight. Welcome to the family, Mom. And that's the story I wanted to share with you today. A homeless woman who gave a stranger her last bit of hot water, a billionaire who learned that money can't buy the things that matter most, a family forged not by blood, but by kindness. Grace Williams, Dr. Grace Mitchell now, runs the largest pediatric cancer foundation in the country. Last year, they treated over 10,000 children, free of charge. Jonathan Mitchell stepped back from the company his father built. He runs the foundation's business operations now, works alongside Grace every single day. And every December 23rd, they go back to St. Michael's Hospital. They stand outside in the cold with hot chocolate and warm blankets. Because you never know who might need help on the coldest night of the year. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment and tell me why. Have you ever helped a stranger and had it change your life? Have you ever been the stranger who needed help? Subscribe to StoryBuddy and hit that notification bell. We tell stories about the moments that change everything, the people we almost miss, the kindness that transforms lives. Where are you watching from tonight? New York? London? Jamaica? Sydney? South Africa? Toronto? Let me know in the comments. Wherever you are, I'm glad you're here. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who maybe feels invisible, someone who's forgotten that their kindness matters. Because it does. It always does. Sometimes the smallest act of compassion creates ripples that change the whole world. One cup of hot water, one moment of seeing someone who's been invisible, one choice to stop and help instead of walking past. That's all it takes. Until next time, StoryBuddy fam. And remember, the person you ignore today might be the one holding exactly what you need. And the kindness you show them might be the thing that saves you both. Never stop looking closer. Never stop being kind.